what's up, Headspaces? VJ, the brother from the ancient mother. I ain't wearing no hat today because, like, I'm growing my hair, yo. I'm like, this is like, it's happening. But anyways, we have been documenting this process for a while. Thank you for the support. And I just want to zone us into something that we've spoken about prior, here and there, but not in depth. And recently, with Jigga's whole return to the mic, because you know Jay-Z always makes these intervals where he comes back. The verse from God Did had the social media world and the online world in general going gaga. I mean, people are declaring this whole greatest verse. But I want to talk about the subject matter in that verse, mainly the whole I'm now a billionaire and have made other billionaires, and that in itself is a reflection of my greatness. Jay-Z in particular is in a place where, because of his mammoth rise to what seemingly is the pinnacle of capitalist hierarchy, a lot of people believe that Hove is the primary hip-hop representative in what is really fundamentally a white world. So I want to ask the question, because we now have hip-hop billionaires, Jay-Z, Kanye West, Dr. Dre, thank you, Takes as usual, making sure I don't fuck up. Because hip-hop now has billionaires, are those men representatives of the culture at large? Is hip-hop in a better place because now a Sean Carter and a Kanye West have bank accounts which truly exclaim the power of how far you can go when what you do is on demand? Or is that purely an individual victory for both men? Do they not only represent their own interests? Have they always represent their own interests? Is this purely a victory for Jay-Z and Kanye, which leaves hip-hop in practically the very same place it's always been in a place where it still plays second fiddle to pop culture? Because again, we must distinguish. There's the hip-hop culture and there is pop culture. Hip-hop has fed into the general pop scope. It is now popular to be a hip-hop artist, but that doesn't always generate to hip-hop in itself being popular. Rap has become a major stream of money. But if you're talking breaking, graph, and all the other elements of hip-hop, we are not having the same conversation. So, come on, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out the fact that it isn't hip-hop that has, quote-unquote, won the victory. It's rap. And whether rap has won the victory or not is really a conversation that I want to discuss. I want to discuss right now the economy of hip-hop. Is capitalism something that is ingrained deeply in the DNA of what it means to be a hip-hopper? Is it all about make money, money, make money, money, money? Is the empowerment of DJing, graphing, and b-boying coming through the revenue of capitalist income? Or are there ways of using money? Is our relationship with money something that as hip-hop heads we need to re-examine to understand how we can truly empower the culture? So, the economy of hip-hop. I want to start right at the very beginning. There's always a kind of debate about the spirit of hip-hop. Earlier on, Kaiser Fritz and I were talking about how hip-hop landed in a place where you have these fragmented groups. The gangster, quote-unquote, rappers don't agree with the conscious, quote-unquote, rappers who don't agree with the abstract, quote-unquote, rappers, and whatever it may be. Are these divisions something that organically grew within the hip-hop fraternity? I think not. Because in this discussion, one thing that is indelible and important to mention is that in the history of hip-hop, hip-hop started as an authentic movement that was burgeoning as an expression of what was happening to inner city youth in the Bronx. And in the moment the white capitalist structure saw the viability of hip-hop, it began to slowly nibble into this movement in small doses. And there you have the Rapper's Delight, the Curtis Blows, the Run DMCs, and this tradition of rappers who were really If you notice the hip hop that was first ushered into the popular culture scene, it was orientated with party. It really was about having a good time, letting your troubles flow into the background, and just focusing on how you could enjoy yourself. This is a part of hip hop's expression. It's liberation through enjoyment. It's freedom through cultivating a sense of happiness. Finding out how in this massive density of struggle you can find a way to be happy. And the first rap music truly reflected this. And when we look at the evolution of how that became gangsta and how the gangsta zapped into what we now know as commercial hip hop and the emphasis on hypermasculinity, and how the men that started to rapped in ways which were more about showing dominance rather than expressing the broader spectrum of humanity, we have to get to the point of how money feeds into that. From the beginning, get money, money, get money, money, money was a chant that was being echoed in all the block parties and in practically every hip-hop occasion. But what does that really mean? What it means is that before hip-hop, funk, jazz, the blues, you name it, the tradition of black expression, the tradition of people of an oppressed context coming together and empowering themselves through art and through thinking and expression was really about how to decode themselves out of the shackles of the system. And for jazz artists, it was really about an inward journey with the instrument, right? For funk artists, it was really about an experimentation with substances that would bring you closer to understanding the world. Because if we look at the spirit of funk, it's a far out kind of deconstruction of the mind that lies in the coming of the psychedelic movement and a lot of the street narcotics which were making their way. Heroin. What that did to funk and jazz introduced an element where people could kind of break outside of the body temporarily and escape life with all of its heaviness through drugs. But those movements were not characterized by money, because what those movements were focused on was the internal freedom. The artists in the funk and the jazz and the blues era prioritized their own internal condition as the main thing. What was the difference in the hip-hop era? The difference in the hip-hop era is that this emphasis on the self seemed to be coming to an oblivious wall, where it felt like the deeper we went into our own subconscious, the more there was nothing to find there. So finally, what the generation after that does, it says, there's no way we can jazz ourselves into ourselves. There's no way we can bring back the funk and express this stinky, wretched part of ourselves and still go on. So the only thing that's going to free us is by coming out of ourselves and really trying to work with the implements that have shackled us in the first place. So instead of pretending like we can meditate while we're chained and we can imagine freedom while the chains are still on us and somehow find an inner world that we can deconstruct while we're oppressed, the younger generation said, fuck that. If these chains can be broken, it's going to be by examining who's holding them and how we can play into their mission. So here was a generation that was unapologetically trying to rope whiteness into a culture, because again, hip-hop expresses itself in oppression, but it's not exclusively a black phenomenon. We're talking about people in the inner city, and if we're being socially accurate, there was a lot of Jewish, there was a lot of people of Spanish descent. I hope I'm giving the right etymological and geographical definitions with these things, but if I'm not, educate me. There was a lot of people from diverse backgrounds coming together to really understand that these previous phenomenons of expressions haven't worked to access our freedom and our power. We need something different. Capitalism is a monster that can only be defeated once you go inside of its body. This was the conclusion. And hip-hop is an expression of this conclusion. Hip-hop is the moment where oppression decided to go inside the so-called belly of the beast instead of fighting him from the outside. It's the moment where David decides to put the slingshot down and reason with Goliath. Is that possible? this reasoning and this logic. So by reasoning with Goliath, we start to play according to his rules. We start to say, oh, okay, if what matters is the bottom line, I can make that money. Because if I'm gonna make enough money to free myself and my mother and my children from this wretched environment, then the general struggle of collective freedom can wait a minute. Because it all starts with me. Jay-Z, again, once famously said, I can't help the poor if I'm one of them. So this is the mentality that goes into what hip-hop is about. That I cannot help the poor if I am one of them. Now, as it evolves, many different ideologies start to filter into what hip-hop is about. Because the pro-black fundamentalist radicalism never left the experience of oppression. Now we enter into the second phase of hip-hop. There is a response from many in the black community that no, you don't have to be different from us to help us. Now in this chapter, I want to go into, is that possible? Was Jay-Z and many others right about being rich in order to help the poor? Or is it not about class at all? Is it really more about how we arrange our societies as we live? Enter hip-hop's second chapter. This conflict between the rootedness of helping the community and focusing on individual growth. Are these two things in conflict? Nipsey Hussle got shot because he was a hood entrepreneur. Or rather, Nipsey Hussle got shot. And the conclusion was for a hood entrepreneur who all he did while he was at the peak of his career was give back to his community, to still get shot in the same community he gave back to is a testament of the fact that there's no way you can help heal the hood. There are some who believe that in the freaking soil, in the ground beneath, there is an inescapable poison that is in these places we've been located in. Whether it's in the ghettos of New York, or you're in the township somewhere in Durban or Gauteng, or right here in the Eastern Cape. Is that true? Let's examine that. So now, hip-hop is experiencing this conflict where there are people coming from the community saying that if what we're going to do is play into capitalism's rules and slowly make our way out of the hood, buy mansions, and look back at where we've been and give small little handouts as a testament to how we care, is that truly revolution? And now we have the burgeoning of the so-called consciousness movement. I hate that because what it implies is that if there are people who are conscious, there are people who are unconscious. And the last time I checked, everybody who breathes is conscious.
Yes.
It's the same thing with woke. Nobody's asleep. If you have information and are privy to certain historical facts and understanding, it doesn't make you any more insightful of the struggle of the people than the average person, because there's layers to experience.
Yeah.
Because you might have the knowledge, the scholastic and the actual conceptual knowledge of what happened, but sometimes when you sit down and you listen to a drunk express the misery they've had and how they deal with it, there's something wise in how somebody chooses to account for their own misery by escaping and claiming that. So my point is, what wokeism and before that the consciousness movement tried to do as labels is they create this binary that there are people who are in the know and there are people who are ignorant. And when we feed into this binary, it creates conflict. And that's exactly what happened in hip-hop. We started having De La Soul against Tupac, The Roots against The Game. You know, and I don't mean the LA rap, I mean the rest of commercial hip-hop. When they did the music video for What They Do, it seemed as if they were spitting at all these aesthetics of rappers popping champagne, having bitches on the screen, wiggling their asses, as men demeaning women and truly glorifying money over family, stability and community. But was that really the case? I don't think so. Because I think if you consider yourself woke or conscious, you still can't escape the fact that you need to navigate that into something that's going to be commercially viable. It's gonna have to make money for you. And if you regard yourself as somebody who's just chasing money exclusively, you need to understand that money doesn't buy happiness. You're gonna understand. You have to still No, with money, how do you negotiate being wealthy and having stable relationships with your partners, with your family? So these things are never separate. Being your bank account and your social interpersonal skills are not separate at all. In South Africa, we have a very valuable principle. It's called Ubuntu. Now, Ubuntu is both those things. It's how you treat people because of what you have, and it's what you have and how you are able to treat other people with it. These things trickle together. It's how identity filters into society and how society filters back into identity. There is no separation, because you do not judge somebody according to what they have. You judge them according to what that makes them, the quality of their actions, the general standard and approach to their attitude is how everybody ultimately is measured, whether they're rich or poor. So you can have billionaires who can give to charity because they understand that what that does is it reinforces capitalism, and you create a whole hullabaloo about it, that hey, I'm giving to charity, please go to my new foundation and check that out. And that becomes a whole commercial enterprise of its own. Now we feed into the economy of charity giving, because there are people who are labeled poor and there are people who are labeled rich, and the poor always need help and the rich are always the one giving them help. And to be a helper of the poor is seen as a positive thing. So now even people who aren't that rich love being seen giving back to the poor because it's capitalistically beneficial. So now, instead of just seeing somebody and helping them out of the goodness of your heart, Takeza, please record me while I do this, because maybe the headspace is going to have many more views from it. Yeah. But case in point, this conflict is an illusion. It was never there. It was actually an expression of how capitalism convinces us of this binary when it really doesn't exist. So now let's zap back into the spirit of hip-hop. We have albums from groups like Arrested Development who give us a way of looking at ourselves that's wholesome and healthy, and they say, I am everyday people. And then we go to groups like the X-Clan. We move and we talk about Brand Nubian. We talk about A Tribe Called Quest and the whole native tongues and how they donned expressions of African heritage and the archive of where they came from, talking about the party, but at the very same time being able to still maintain a level of wholesomeness and respect about how they spoke about women, how they spoke about each other, and the expression of black love. And we go into the different scholars who informed us of how we were beginning to become so money hungry that we're forgetting how to maintain integrity within our communities. This bleeds into the 90s, and I want to make the example of two albums. I'm going to focus on America and get to South Africa in a bit. Dead Prez's Let's Get Free, and on the other side, Jay-Z's The Blueprint, represent seemingly two different aspects of how hip-hop looks at money. Dead Prez, pro-black nationalist. You have interludes there by the chairman, Yeshitela, Huey Newton. So there's a lot of consciousness about where we've been and understanding that capitalism is a police state. That when you are black, you are literally being seen as a criminal before you even do anything. And because of that, when you have money, you're not treated the same way as other people. So it's not that Dead Prez were vehemently oppressed to making that money. There's verses in that album that specifically state, yo, we gotta make it. It's bigger than hip-hop. It's about dismantling a system from within. And Dead Prez, with Let's Get Free, had a methodical understanding of the fact that this is anti-capitalist via being able to go intra-capitalism. That the only way we can remove this capitalist thorn is with another thorn. And it's this circling within of how we can defeat this oppression. That is the great investigation. Dead Prez tells us that if our principles are straight, if we understand what makes us happy isn't the amount of money, but the friends we have and the company we can keep, and how we take care of our bodies through tracks like Be Healthy. If we know that the most important kind of wealth is physical and social, then what we get to do with the money is going to follow, because we understand the most important principles. Now, Jigga, on the other hand, not so much. Jigga's main objective is to literally become a phenomenal force, breaking out of this capitalist white structure and thus being a modern day capitalist god. Fritz is male language, and that's why I might be a little bit darker. Shout out to Fritz Groy if you love it.
Yeah.
So now, Jigga says you can become a god in capitalism. Jehovah, Ho. Dead Press says you need to look after your body and look after your friendships. And that's the only way we can be free. Hence, let's get free. Are these approaches two different fundamental approaches to how hip-hop views freedom in its economy, or can they coexist? I think they can. I think it's okay to bump Dead Prez and bump Jay-Z at the very same time, as long as we understand that if we happen to elevate in the plateaus of being viable to the capitalist gaze, it's going to be our ability to know what's important in terms of our values in bringing together family, those we regard as friends, and being able to understand the principles of empathy, honor, and respect, principles that, you know, the Dead Prez crew kind of made akin to the samurai way and these Asian principles of discipline, while at the very same time kind of being steeped in a kind of pseudo-Rastafarian idea of respect through self-respect first, and being able to respect others as you would respect yourself, the whole golden rule. So in this last conclusion, I want to say there is no reason why we can't make money, and be able to be enlightened within self. This is not something that a spiritual guru should have exclusive buy-in on. There is definitely no contradiction in Jay-Z and Dead Prez. That's why the best artists have been able to straddle between these things and show us that humanity is both about understanding how we can start in like working with these capitalist tangles and working with ourselves at the very same time. So now, Karl Marx, the revolution of socialism, Che Guevara, Fidel Castro, the conflict of how socialism in itself is poisoned from within because the class structures don't really reflect how people grow, the myth of equality versus equity versus distribution, the fact that nature in and of itself doesn't give us gifts or abilities in the same level or extent, and thus what that means is we work with what we have while working with each other. The fact that competition is healthy and yet coexistence is healthy too, and that what we have to do is find a balance within these two, because through competition we're pushed to be better, but through coexistence we understand that the better is not for self, it's for everybody. So now, how do we bring it into hip hop? This is not a struggle against money, and this is not a struggle against social upliftment. It's how we use money to uplift the society. It's how money can trickle into your identity as an individual and what that does to how you treat everybody else. Because I'll give you an example. You get your first grand check. You get $1 million in your Capitec account. I said Capitec. They need to sponsor us for that. Yeah. What do you do with that money? Do you go, I need to go to the club and start celebrating with a whole bunch of bitches? Or do you contact your mother and tell her that there's a chance you could now buy her that house she was hoping for? These things are not exclusive.
Yeah.
Whether you start by celebrating with the bitches, then buy mom the house, or buy mom the house, then celebrate with the bitches, or just buy mom a house, or just celebrate with the bitches. What we're saying is, at some point, if you celebrate with the bitches, there's gonna come a time where you need to do something a little bit more sustainable. And if you buy mom a house, there's gonna come a time where you have to also feel good about the accomplishment that you have achieved. So don't subject yourself to the grand will of others, but at the very same time, don't separate yourself from the cohesive relationships that you have. This is the fine balance that hip-hop is struggling to deal with. Because a lot of artists in the trap scene, I'll name names, the Futures, the Young Thugs, don't talk about the importance of giving back to family enough. And I say enough because yes, Future and them have verses about giving my mama a house and but really besides the things that we are able to buy for people, how can we engage with how we're feeling? Buying mama a house isn't gonna solve all her problems. There's very internal traumas that mama deals with. And I think what's missing in the trap movement is a sense of psychological self-reflection. What's missing in hip-hop is a sense of psychological self-reflection. What's missing in rap is a sense of psychological self-reflection. And how this gravitates towards the general ethics of money. So yes, we want that money, money. It makes us proud when a Ricky Rick can have a cotton fest, when a Kuli Chana can go back to his hometown and create one of the biggest festivals in South Africa for hip-hop, when an Osmic who started in a street corner shop selling hip-hop memorabilia and merchandise can now host the biggest hip-hop festival in Africa. These are wins. But if they're going to become more than wins for the individuals are going to have to go to a place where they reflect on how their stature now enables them to be able to help in the most powerful ways. So yes, Jay-Z's bragging about how Braun and Ye and Rihanna are all part of the Rock Nation billionaire pyramid is an accomplishment. So let's see more of our millionaires and billionaires actually trying to enlighten others and bring others in to the path, channel others in to how to be successful in this game. We need more workshops, we need more engagement, we need more real talking about how hip-hop trickles into money and money trickles into hip-hop. We need more is underground hip-hop viable conversations. And this is what the headspace is for, primarily. What we do for South African hip-hop culture is we bring it out of this nebulous place of a romanticism, loving hip-hop for the sake of it. Because we understand that whatever sake you have, it goes down to the roots of the system that you are within. So we love emphatic tabs, but we still visibly see that there's struggle there. Peace to tabs. We love our legends, we love our icons. Recently, DJ Academics was trending because he called our hip-hop legends Dusty
and broke.
So again, this is the same conversation. When we don't cohesively show that there's no conflict between these things, younger generations think that, oh, so these old niggas were all about the happiness and the fun and they forgot to make that money, when that isn't the case. That is a gross misrepresentation of the actual story. The actual story is that hip-hop was born in its pursuit of empowering through capitalism, and once it was wrapped into capitalism, there was no blueprint on how we could use capitalism to empower ourselves and possibly defeat capitalism from within. So yes, we are still in that journey. Hip-hop has made many millionaires. Hip-hop has now made an exclusive set of billionaires, and many people underneath that who float within a sustainable margin. But we still aren't asking the most important questions. How can this money circulate in ways that really impact our psychological development as people? Because capitalism is primarily an agent that seeks to turn us into nothing but mechanical subjects who work on behalf of bigger ideas. So what I'm trying to do with this episode is saying that's not the issue. The issue is being aware of how these structures use you. Because when you're used unknowingly, then it becomes traumatic. But when you understand who's pulling the strings, then you start putting your own level of movement into it. And then maybe, like Pinocchio, you come alive. And this is what I'm saying. Maybe there is no coming out of the matrix, but there is reconstructing the matrix. Maybe the metrics we use to measure greatness is a constantly developing idea that depends on our ability to understand how we're both oppressed and free at the same time. How, as a man, you are free because you are more powerful than women, but you are oppressed because of the very same thing. So in conclusion, I'd like to say shout out to the Ricky Ricks, rest his soul, to the Kuli Chanas, to the Caspanyo Vests, who do splits between the two rows versus. And I want to say that's not the problem. Maybe there are not any problems at all. Maybe what we really need to do is understand that we are all in the same struggle, as West Coast MCs said when they were trying to bring people together and galvanize against gang culture. It's the same struggle. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but powers and principalities in high places. That's the mind. So make that money, but please understand what that money makes you into. And that's the ultimate conclusion. Hip-hop is stuck in capitalism because the world is stuck in capitalism. And in order for hip-hop to free itself, it needs to make that money, but most importantly, when it gets that money, it needs to understand what that money makes of it. So Jay-Z was all mad because people are calling him a capitalist. Ugh, he's always been a capitalist. So that shows a lack of self-awareness. Let's be aware, but let's make money at the same time. But let's also be enlightened. These things do not live separately. Vijay, the brother from the Ain't Mother. What is the economy of hip-hop? The economy of hip-hop is you cannot have inner peace if you do not engage with the outer war. And I don't know, does that have a name? It's neither capitalism nor socialism, because we've tried all of these ways. So I do think we are being anti-capitalist, but we are doing it from within. You tell me. If you don't agree, if you do agree, please holler at me in the comment section. It's been a beautiful episode. Let's talk more about it. Salute.